going on? What's crack-a-lackin', my peoples, my peoples? Welcome to a special edition of This Is Happening. Today, we're visiting different spots in the community to have what we call restaurant chats. It's my belief that culture is made by culture makers, and that, of course, includes artists, food makers, educators, and many others. And everyone has a voice. And I'm so happy that we're starting the series right here in Los Angeles on Jefferson at Revolucionario North African Tacos. So happy to be here with one of the owners, Susan. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great.
And also joining us is one of KPFK's host, Nana Jamfi, attorney, activist, host, educator, and bon vivant.
I like the bon vivant part. I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us in your home.
It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
So we're just going to have a conversation, and your husband, Chef Zaid, is going to be bringing out some food at various points, and as we talk, and we'll do that. Before we get started the political session, I do want to talk a little about the food, just in terms of, tell us about the Taco Fixins Bar. Can you describe the fullness of that?
Our taco toppings are based on North African cuisine and Northwest Africans, actually. It's not just North Africa. North Africa is really part of like Northwest Africa. And we wanted to use the term African because just Africanness and blackness in general globally is erased. And when historians talk about the Moors ruling Andalusia for 700 some years, they're always phrased as Arabs, but they were Arabized peoples. Genetically, they were Northwest Africans, and a lot of them were black. And we are very proud of that. I mean, it's a global culture. Right. Northwest Africa was like kind of an international superhighway for so many different influences, and we want to like. By including Africa in the name, we want people to realize that Africa it's not static. I think people think of in the West, people think of Africa as static, like nothing has changed in thousands of years. But it's a dynamic, alive culture, and the food culture is alive. And globally speaking, there are a lot of influences. Since Northwest Africa influenced Spanish cooking and Spanish agriculture and so many Spanish cultural elements, when the Spaniards and Southern Mediterranean people set sail for the Americas, they brought that culture with them. So we do have a lot of Latin American customers, Mexican customers in particular, who are aware of that historical bond.
Yeah, that's great. And one of my favorites, I have a couple favorites, but I love the pickled onions and also the pineapple kimchi. I hate to sound like, some nerd from New York who doesn't understand either Korean or African cooking, because I don't, but I know the food that I love, and I love your pineapple kimchi. What are some of the other things that you do that, what are the flavors represented in your taco fixins?
Well, the pineapple kimchi and then the regular kimchi, it's basically it's Salvadoran curtido, and then I added pineapple to one of them. They're not even really kimchi, but I know that's what people will like. So sometimes I just name things to see what kind of reaction I'll get. And so people like that, I am of Korean heritage and I'm making kimchi, which isn't even real kimchi, but people will swear up and down that it's real kimchi. So I like to do like kind of my own social experiments with like what has currency or not and what people think is authentic or not. So basically, if people read you as an authentic person, they'll believe that what you do is authentic. And in a way, it is authentic,
Let me ask.
And then like the onions, escabeche, that's something you'll find in a lot of Latin American restaurants too, and that is a North African influence in Spanish cooking that was brought over to Latin America. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the other toppings, we do, pickled radish, pickled carrots. That's very North Africans pickle a lot too.
Right.
And then the different sauces, we do a red harissa, which is a traditional Algerian and Tunisian hot sauce made from dried red chilies, oranges, spices, peppers. And then we do a green harissa, which is basically, it's very similar to a Mexican aguachile for ceviches. But, that's also similar to a chermoula. There are lots of food cultures in the world that make like a spicy green herb hot sauce. And then we do a garlic yogurt sauce just because it tastes good.
Right.
Something it just tastes good. And then we do a pineapple chutney, pineapple salsa, because we like to address like what our customers ask for and our like different demographics. And our customers are really diverse, but because we are close to USC and there's a lot of Indian international students, and Little Bangladesh is like in the middle of Koreatown, which is just north of us, we do get a lot of South Asian customers. And it just made sense. It's like, I know they'll like it. I know the rest of our customers will like it. You know, it's a little sweet. It's like a spicy ketchup.
Right. Tell us a little bit about how Revolutionary got started. How did you pick this place, and where do you see your location in terms of the trends of the LA demographics, the diaspora, restaurant culture? Where do you see your family's restaurant fitting into the current LA food and political landscape?
I picked this location. I found it on Craigslist. The rent was really cheap.
Right.
And I knew exactly where it is. It's a very crossroady neighborhood. So basically, we're on the northern end of South Central LA, which, you know, LA City voted to call it South LA a few years ago.
Right.
It's still South Central LA, and then it's also part of West Adams. And when I first opened, various members of like different kinds of communities that live here, they all came to tell me like what this neighborhood, do you know where you are? Do you know where you are? Not one person mentioned to me that this block is also historic old Koreatown. The oldest Korean American Presbyterian church is there. And I'm not particularly tied to a Korean customer base. I didn't grow up in Koreatown, so that's not the reason I came here, but it is on the, you know, the northern end of South Central LA. We wanted to, you know, bring our North Africanness here, and it's also very crossroady, and we are a mixed family. We're a, you know, multicultural mixed family. We're polyglots. I'm kind of a half-ass polyglot. And you know, this is like the Byzantine Quarter, the Greek Byzantine Quarter. We're close to the Salvadoran corridor.
And your husband, Chef Zaid, is French Algerian, and
he was born in France, and his parents are Algerian Berbers, and Berbers are the indigenous people of North Africa.
Right.
And like the whole entire northern cap from Egypt to Morocco, and then like the southern part underneath, they influence all of that. And he actually did have a DNA test done, and it's basically the 1/3 of North of Africa, a top half.
Wow.
Yeah, so his like DNA is a story of where Berbers were.
so I didn't mean to interrupt
Okay.
your flow
No,
about
that's fine.
the neighborhood.
So the neighborhood, yeah, and then there's, you know, we get a lot of support from Jewish customers too, halal food, and I hear that from a lot of halal restaurant owners. And you know, we're like close to mid-city, and so I just felt like everybody would come here, and everybody did.
Right.
And it's a very, very sleepy stretch of Jefferson. There's no foot traffic, so we have to constantly market. We've been here for almost 3 years. We have no signs on the outside of the building. We have no visibility.
Oh
so
my
it's just
God, you're
good-
the coolest of the cool.
just like goodwill and word of mouth, and you know, then it's a little bit of a struggle at times because we just have to constantly talk about ourselves,
Right.
and so do our customers. You know.
What do you see as some of the challenges living and working in this community? What are some of the challenges the community faces in addition to what you face?
I think really, you know, this community, we're fine on our own. The big threat really is gentrification. And that all started when you know, enrollment at higher education was just peaking and growing because of millennials. And USC didn't have enough student housing, so student housing started bleeding over into like this neighborhood, this part, you know, further west of USC. And so a lot of single-family homes were sold, and they were converted to like student housing. Now, last fall, USC added 35% more student housing. So they solved the student housing crisis. But what gentrifiers and developers don't utilize in their algorithms is that information isn't available in their algorithms yet. So they're late to the game in trying to buy up this block for student housing. They're just late. But they don't care because they're playing with synthetic, fictitious, elastic capital. They don't care. And so that's like the biggest threat, gentrification. And it's displacing families. It's starting to displace my business. A developer was planning on buying it, and he wanted to raise my rent double without adding any amenities. So basically, as a woman of color, you know, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not black, but I still am a woman of color in the sense that I'm not white either. So I don't benefit from gentrification in the same way white people do. And I get pushed around and about. So another person's buying this building. He does want to raise my rent. He doesn't want to raise, but he's going to upgrade and give us more amenities for raising our rent. And his rent increase isn't nearly as much. But what gentrification does, it's just going to be, I have to make, for every $1,000 that my rent goes up, I have to do $5,000 more in sales just to cover that. It's not, from a, landlord's point of view, they think it's just $1,000. It's not, it's a lot. So if you take a family of 5, let's say 4 working adults, and they rent a house here, and the rent is raised by $500, that's $500 they may not even have, so they can be evicted. And that's the biggest threat, gentrification.
Right. Nana, you are a community activist, you're an attorney, you're deeply connected to many of the struggles of working class folks throughout Los Angeles. In terms of what Susan has shared with us about what she sees as the effects of gentrification, how does that align, or does it align with your view from where you're sitting as an attorney, activist, and radio host? What do you see as the trends of gentrification affecting Los Angeles communities right now?
I mean, what we have really is just the re-colonialization of the area. That's really what it is. When you look at colonialism in its purest form, what it brings in terms of white supremacy, racism, what it brings in terms of capitalism, what it brings in terms of patriarchy. And people might think, well, how does patriarchy fit in? But as you're talking about, as a woman of color, when we look at the neighborhoods that are being gentrified, most of the people that are living in those neighborhoods are women of color and their children, right? And that's the household, right? The majority of the households look like that. And it's definitely a part of the thinking of these developers. Who are they pushing out, right? If they thought they were pushing out some, brothers and others that were packed and ready to deal, they may not have that same response. But they figure that they're pushing out folks who are immigrants, not just, of course, brown immigrants, but black immigrants, Asian immigrants. They figure that they're pushing out women. They figure that they're pushing out folks who are gender nonconforming, femmes, trans. This is who they see in the communities, and those are the communities that they've been attacking first. And so when you look at SC, and you look at these buildings as you're driving by, who was living there, right? And we know that it wasn't white students with the funds to pay for SC. It was working class families who were putting many people into their apartments to be able to afford that rent, right? And so when it's clear that from a political perspective, it represents a colonization because it is not the people who live here who are making the decisions about what this neighborhood looks like, about what is developed, that it is clearly the developers and their money that is driving it, just like the Queen of Spain's money and the royalty of Portugal and of Britain was driving colonization, right? And then economically, we see that they look at our neighborhoods as just resource, and in particular land, right? And land is always the greatest resource, as our brother El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, taught us. And so they look at the land aspect, they look at the labor aspect, right? In terms of us as people who can work on the properties or in the properties or buy stuff, right, and be consumers once they take those properties over. And then we look at the cultural shift, right, which colonization also is a lot about the culture. What does it mean to live in a neighborhood? What's a good neighborhood? What's a safe neighborhood, right, as defined by them? So safety becomes what causes Stephon Clark to be murdered, right? Stacy becomes, what is it, next door neighbor, whatever that little act is or whatever, where they say,
I saw somebody suspicious.
Right, there's this man selling.
It's called Sketchy Blacks.
Yeah,
That's what the app should be called, because that's effectively sketchy racists, sketchy blacks.
Exactly. People end up getting murdered in their own backyard, right? But that's how this is happening. I think I shared with you once, Jerry, that I had to stop the police from harassing a brother who was literally running for the bus because a young white man was standing at the bus stop and he just knew that brother was running towards him in order to harm him in some way. And the police actually stopped and entertained this foolishness. Like, I had to tell the cop, come on, the brother's running for the bus. And I had to tell the white guy, you realize that you're on Crenshaw. It's at Crenshaw College. You're on Crenshaw. You're going to see black people running for the bus. So if that's going to frighten you, you need to not live here because you make us unsafe. And that is a piece that I think we really need to get across to the young white folks who are coming into our neighborhoods, that you are making us unsafe.
Mortally so.
Yes. You know, we risk death because of your presence. You are impoverishing us. Right? We lose because of income because of your presence. And you are disenfranchising us. Because when you come in and we get pushed out, then how do we get our representatives in office? How do we begin to be represented on the political sphere? We can't. And we
can't
that
run for a
happening.
bus without a death threat. How can we overcome the entrenched power of the politics of white supremacy while folks that are benefiting from it are sometimes wholly unaware of their impact? And they're just following the rules, right? Oh, I'm a nice white guy, I'm a nice person, I moved to this neighborhood and I like it, but I'm really shook if I see a black guy running for the bus. And not realizing the disconnect between that reaction and the danger you pose to the neighborhood. And the only people who can not appreciate that reaction are people who haven't paid the cost of white supremacy, because anyone who's paid that cost knows exactly what that danger is.
Right.
And to expand on your colonialization motif, I mean, it's very deliberate, okay? This is how white people move into neighborhoods like this. They typically start buying up a block. And they make sure they buy up a block. And it's all with real estate agents, too. And they make sure to buy up a block that can be turned into a historic overlay zone. And then they start, pressuring other homeowners on the block to sell. You're going to get a lot of money. You're going to get a lot of money. You can still move. And they create their little island space. And then if you look at the mixed-use commercial residential developments that are going to be built near Crenshaw or whatever, it's close to public transportation. And also they're telling you, come and live in an island space. So not only are you they set up the conditions where they're going to be embattled against the neighborhood. Take resources from the neighborhood, but not shop in the neighborhood. They're not going to go to the neighborhood hair salon. They're not going to go to the neighborhood barber shop. They're not going to go to El Rey Market across the street.
No, they want to import other big brand businesses that they're familiar and comfortable with to displace the local businesses.
Oh yeah, you're going to look up, as we say, you see yoga on this side, the cafe place on this side, your neighborhood is gone. You look, they'll eat up your neighborhood like a lawnmower eats grass.
And this is stuff you just see, they have the Nextdoor app.
Yes, that's
and all these Facebook pages. It's like, oh, there's just so much noise in this neighborhood. And it's like, that's why you got that house for cheap. What and it's like, really, are people of color the only people who make noise at night? No.
My neighbors and I have a pact because I live in the Hollywood Hills and most of my neighbors are white. There's another black guy, but we can't have a third. And
that would just fit the demographic.
We got the letters from our white neighbors. They're like, 3 is too many. We're being tolerant. There's 2 of you in the building. So I think that one of the, I'm sorry, I'm completely distracted by this beautiful dog outside. I completely lost my train of thought. I've got a thing for dogs.
Jerry likes dogs.
I like dogs.
Too. I was looking at the dog.
That dog is beautiful.
Yeah, he's good. He's like a golden god, this dog. So I think that one of the things that happens is that people not only don't recognize the displacement that they're doing, but they bring their vision of what their new neighborhood should be with them. And you can point to, there's thousands of hideous examples, and some of the more persistent ones that became viral. I remember the story of this woman in Prospect Park in Brooklyn just about 3-4 years ago. And there's these vendors that sell usually or frequently, traditionally and historically, Puerto Rican men. They tend to be older, and they sell paracos, these ices, and they're flavored. Kids love it, whatever. And back in the day, they used to also have rum for the adults. So, New York in the 70s. So right, exactly. So right, it's
he
right.
put it in there himself.
It was great. Come on, you had a concert in the park. You have your drink. It was the 70s were great when you were 10 and drinking rum in the park. So, in any event, this woman, this new young homeowner is there with her 3-year-old. The 3-year-old wants paracas and is saying, "Oh well, give me." The mom says no. The kid has a complete meltdown, and I want them. So the mother goes out on this political rant, engaging all the resources that she can to stop there being any paraqua sales in Prospect Park. Right, because she doesn't want to deal with the child. So the solution is to destroy this element of local culture that has existed for decades and to destroy this man's livelihood because I'm here now and I own this building, so F you. And it's that level, and that as hideous as that disconnect is, it is entirely indicative and aligned with the series of disconnects that come with people who show up in neighborhoods, whatever neighborhood it is, and be like, I'm here now and here's how it's going to change.
Well, I think that part of that, though, I don't know how much that is not something that they know in terms of the attitude that they have, right? Because that's also part of, colonialism. You say to people, you know what, you don't deserve this land. You don't deserve this place because you don't know what to do with it. You indigenous people, you're here and you're just living off the land like squirrel and rabbits. I mean, this is literally what John Adams, when we were in law school, you read the Federalist Papers and they literally lay it out. You don't know what to do with this place. You should be chopping all these trees. You should be doing something with this water. You should be taking all this gold and making yourself
Aboriginal
rich.
rights are just for occupancy.
But that's exactly the language they use when they talk about, gentrifying. It's like, oh, these people look at all that trash. They don't know how to beautify their neighborhoods. They have no understanding that, city services are reduced in lower income neighborhoods.
Right. They don't like nice things.
And it's not up to the renters.
Right.
It's the landlords. The building owners are supposed to beautify, but they don't.
Right. The city politicians are supposed to make the alleys clean. People are actually doing more to keep their alleys clean than the city is.
Right.
And people in buildings, in neighborhoods are saying, look, this is too much. And we are organizing events. Say, come on, neighborhood, block club, or whatever, let's clear out this thing. Because people are waiting, complaining, filing things, and the city just doesn't respond. Period. Animals die, they just lay there. Until they are, barely anything more than bone. It's not because people in our community don't realize that it smells, it doesn't look good, there should be more dignity for this animal than that, but they don't respond when you call.
And gentrifiers don't know that. They blame systemic problems on the residents themselves. They blame the problems of vulture white supremacist capitalism on the renters themselves. So it makes them feel good, like they have a halo. But we're gonna clean up everything. We're gonna beautify. That's a historic building. You just don't appreciate it. And they don't understand that what they're doing is the same thing that their parents did and their grandparents did when they took over for the suburbs. And they still benefit. White people still benefit from preferential loans and lower interest loans at all.
I guess in many ways it shouldn't be surprising, in as much as there's obviously a deep historical link. This is the process. This is the process, as you said, whether it's colonization and gentrification is definitively linked to that, in as much as colonization is the initial, essential form of gentrification. We are having this conversation on Tongva land, and once that first theft happened, there's just been a continuous series of other thefts, and our organized, purposeful disconnect from the initiation of this process of thefts and not connecting it to this moment is one of the reasons that the forces that are interested in continuing this horrific capitalist turnover and oppression, it's one of the reasons that they are able to retain their power, because we look at ourselves and our struggles as a point and a moment in terms of isolation more often than not always. Sometimes we woke and we realize we have real connections we can make with others, and this is how we make it better. But what we're encouraged to believe is that the world we are living in is our fault. Any absence of success in our lives, whether it be health care for our children or being able to make your rent, is again your fault and your personal failing, that you're not connected to the Tongva nation that was displaced, that you're not connected to the millions of people that came before you, millions of people that will come after. And there's an inherent strength, I think, in the realization of the power of our connection, but that is curated out of us.
And I think when we're talking in that vein, when you look at the solutions that are allegedly laid out there, right? Because gentrification is causing this increased houselessness. Everyone may not be on the sidewalk. A lot of people were in their cars. A lot of people are on people's couches for a minute, and people's garages for a minute. But when you look at how that is happening and the solutions that the city and other sort of nonprofits and others come up with, the solutions always assume that there's a pathology or that there's something wrong with the person.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we can help you. Now, but you've got to go through all this counseling. You know, if you go into short-term, if we can provide short-term housing, but you got to be in by 9 p.m. Now, this person didn't do anything,
Right.
but suddenly they got like halfway house rules,
And it
right?
starts
You
at
can't have
birth.
people come over, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. So suddenly, the solution is that you're going to help to do this behavior modification. Right, which we know is their solution to everything. You know, what's happening in the schools. They're trying to help our children to know how to behave,
just
right?
act a little bit differently, it will be better.
Right, and this is
Yeah.
the standard of that, and you can't quite get there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll still see what we can do to put the monkey in a suit and see if it can kind of work
And it
out.
starts with prenatal care, and it starts at birth and early childhood education. I remember when we first opened here, I saw a sign. It was for, low-income toddlers and nursery school-age children. It was like, and clearly it was not like created by somebody in the community because these children were described as like, high risk. And I'm like, they're just babies. I mean, what are they at high risk for except like mostly like systemic things, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and they want to teach
I've
these.
been mugged by babies.
Yes, they want to teach babies from the point of view that they are traumatized by being high risk.
From the beginning, it's like you're deficient.
Yeah.
And that again gives the idea to folks that these neighborhoods are being improved and gives a space or a platform for our own people to say that.
Yeah.
Right? And because that's where the class issue comes in, right? For people to say, black people who are one step, I always tell them, you're one step away from South Central and you're other step away from Mississippi. Do you know what I mean? Like literally one step away from each, 1 foot in Mississippi. And some of you don't even got the Mississippi. You're just one step from Africa, right? But this idea that you can now, because you've moved into this other place, look your nose down. Okay, but now explain the gentrification of Baldwin Hills. Explain the gentrification of View Park. Those neighborhoods look fabulous.
And the Merck.
Those neighborhoods look clean. Those neighborhoods look right. So what's the problem there? Right? You can't use the same type of pathological descriptions of black folks and other folks of color in the hood when you're describing their situation, and yet the gentrification is still happening. So it clearly has nothing to do with the fault or the deficiencies of folks in terms of economics, etc. And clearly it's just based upon the typical issues that colonialism placed upon race, economics, gender, and how those define power.
Right. One of the things that I really love about living in Los Angeles is that in addition to this kind of petri dish that we live in terms of structured oppression and structural oppression that we're trying to transit through and get on with our lives and embrace the good things that we like. In addition to all that struggle, that necessary struggle that I'm happy to engage in, there's a tremendous amount of beauty in Los Angeles, and there's a tremendous amount of cultural beauty in Los Angeles. And some of that cultural beauty comes from spaces that, like you have built and created with your family, like this space here. I know that when Susan doesn't like talking about it, she won't mention it, but I will. When they first opened, they had this pay it forward jar. Instead of tipping their staff, people just put this money in pay it forward jar, and on Mondays they would have a community meal for folks in the community who may not be able to afford to eat here otherwise. And it was had its challenges because there's mental health issues in the community, et cetera. But the fact that restaurateurs move their small business into community and are thoughtful enough and caring enough about the community to make a space for and try to find creative ways to connect with the community, because it's typically what people do is just throw their hands up and say, oh, well, I can't be involved with that. I'm just here to, push this masa.
Type of way,
Yeah.
right? That looking down type of way, like we're going to bring you to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't do any of that. It's just,
Exactly.
here's your food. You get utensils, a napkin, a bottle of cold water. Some people ask for a soda. That's fine. I'm not going to say no sugar for you. You know what I mean? Sometimes people need sugar. That's fine.
Well, why was that an important element of y'all opening this restaurant, and why is it an important element to you? Why do you think it's your responsibility to feed people that can't afford food?
It's a cultural component of, heritage for both myself and my husband. Like North African Berbers, if somebody's hungry, you invite them into your home. Mm-hmm. And there's a strong Buddhist influence in Korean culture. Mm-hmm. My parents always said, if somebody's hungry, you have to feed them. Mm-hmm. It is, it is your imperative to feed them. You have food, you have to feed them. Mm-hmm. So that's, and that's it. And then, once we started doing it, we realized we are making a larger point. We don't, just because somebody's homeless doesn't mean they are not a member of this community. They are still of this community. We have no desire to call the police on people. Homelessness is not a crime. Poverty is not a crime. Somebody who's victimized by the system since they were even born, before they were even born, that's not a criminal. So we don't want to do anything like that. And then in just welcoming people inside and say, here's food. You can come back anytime. Come back anytime you're hungry. The onus is on us too. We have personal responsibility to help each other.
Right.
And I was going to say, about culture makers and cross fertilizations. My parents are in their 70s. When they came to America, they were not having conversations like this. They always taught us that to believe in equality and things like that. But relationships between people of color in Los Angeles or in America were not evolved to that point. They happened in political spheres, Yellow Peril and the Black Panthers talk, but not in everyday spaces. My generation, I went to school in America, so it was just we had conversations like this. I think my daughter's generation, she's Generation Z, 19, second year of college, they're much more further along. So when I see the protests compared to 1992, when people protest in South Central LA, and I participated in one, it's a mixed group protesting together. Right. So, people of color too. We do have elements among us that are, that can turn the other way. We all know that too. Right. The Ben Carsons. Oh yeah. Stacey Dash.
Right.
Nikki, whatever her name is. Nikki Haley.
Right. Yeah. Right, absolutely.
And the gentrifiers look for people like that.
I was about to say, see, that falls into the conversation, right, of the gentrifiers, of this colonialism, because part of what you do is that you make it appear to folks that there's this limited resource for them.
Yeah.
Right? White folks are not sitting around here thinking that they're limited in anything. Yeah. They're not thinking that, there's only so many jobs that we're going to have. There's only so much land that we're going to have. Generally speaking, we know that we have those other folks, right, that are clear on the fact that they're being overrun and they want to do something about it, right? But generally, they don't have these conversations where they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of jobs. We're going to run out of space. We're going to run out, because they figure they just take it away from us, right? And just instill in us that if the Koreans are on this block, that means you can't be on this block. So now you got to fight like hell to keep the Koreans off this block.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Even intra our communities, right? Mm-hmm. Folks saying, hey, we've got to deal with these black immigrants that are coming from Africa and the Caribbean because somehow they're taking over or they're taking up this space that we should be taking, right? And I tell folks, I'm like, that would eliminate Kwame Ture. Do you know what I'm saying? That would eliminate Marcus Garvey. That would eliminate Shirley Chisholm. Think about what you're talking about and why you're saying this, because we didn't used to talk this way, right? Who's getting us to say that we're upset that my son is going to Howard, we're from Ghana, right? And that somehow he's taking the space of a person who has 400 years of history, a black person in this country, when we really should be trying to find out, why is Howard not getting the funding? Why are the HBCUs not getting the funding they should get, so that any black student that wants to go to college has the capacity to go to college?
Right.
Yeah. You nailed it.
You all are business owners, and you have large voices in your communities, and you're also mothers with children, teenagers in Los Angeles. Why are you raising your children in Los Angeles? And what I mean by that is, because we spent a lot of time unpacking a lot of the hardships, and we'd even get to them all. But there's something for some people beating at the core of this city that pulls them in and that keeps them here, and that makes them want to have families and raise children here. What were some of the things that motivated you to raise your families in Los Angeles?
I mean, for me, part of it was the work, right? The connection to the community. And so I would love to be in Ghana and have that same kind of connection at home. I don't have that connection at home because my parents took a Pan Am to come out here to the United States and to, my father went to Berkeley. That's where he got his PhD in civil engineering. So that disconnect is there, right? And so we have to do these things like have family reunions and make the trip home, which is not cheap, right? To be able to reconnect. And for me, the capacity to know that I am not more than 20 minutes away from anywhere I want to be with my people and with those who are in community with my people is fabulous. I'm not more than 20 minutes away from here. That's what I want. I don't want to be out in the boondocks and have to take 2 hours to get here because then I'm not coming through here. And I wanted my son to grow up in that. I wanted my son to not be like me. Again, I grew up my father worked for the World Bank. I grew up in a very white world other than living in Africa. And I didn't want my son to grow up in that world where you're the weirdo and you're strange and people are making comments about how your skirt fits on you, your kilt, and people are making comments about your hair. I wanted him to be in a place where he was supported, where he is loved, where he is treated with respect, where people let him know that he has value. And that happens in this community.
Mm-hmm.
And this community, you mean South Central?
South Central, yeah, that happens in South Central.
What were some of your thoughts? I mean, I know sometimes people don't plan, like, I'm going to raise a family. We'll be in this state at this location. But what made you embrace staying in Los Angeles to raise a family and have children?
Well, like Nana, my parents made that choice for me. When I was 5, they flew me over on Korean Air, Boeing 747. So I grew up in LA. And I've traveled quite a bit, not just internationally, but domestically. And I like LA. And I raised my kids in different neighborhoods in LA, but it was just never the right mix. And finally, we decided to just move to South Central LA. And I like the mix here because it addresses, all the heritages that my kids have. And my daughter likes it that she meets people on a regular basis, on a daily basis, who will identify her as Blasian or Afro-Asian. They just look at her and they know. Right. Whereas like in other neighborhoods, it's like most of the time it's like, what are you? I have no idea. Right. So she likes that because to be mixed, and she is, it's a relatively rare mix to be Korean and Algerian and Berber, right? And just to be around people who I see you, I recognize you, is a big deal to my daughter. And then just being like 20 minutes away from all of my friends, because this is very crossroady. I think, South Central LA is like really in the media. If I read one more print article about, drive-throughs and drive-bys, right? They all mention this, like, have you ever been here? But we're 20 minutes away from the rest of LA. Right. Everything is so close.
The beach.
Right.
Yeah, I can get a car and I can go and go to a beach and be there in 20 minutes. People come to visit and they're like, people are like, really? Right? Public transportation. Whereas other places are getting a bus that comes through just in the morning and the afternoon because it's really just for the people that come clean and work. Man, you go on Crenshaw, there's like 7 lines. You know what I mean? There's we have access, whether it be public transportation, whether it be your own transportation, to be able to connect up with everything we want to connect up with.
And now we're about to dig into this amazing food, these North African tacos here at Revolutionario. Chef Zaid.
Hello, everyone.
Ooh, that looks
wow.
good. That looks good.
This looks amazing.
So, Jerry, just for you, we got a little taste of North Africa. Okay?
Yes.
That's where we are today.
Merguez, he knows what I love.
In Ghana now.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
Tell us about the food, Chef.
Please.
Okay, so Black Happy Falafel, it's a bit of a mix between the Middle East and the North Africa because I'm the one who give it the North African twist by putting the spice mixture from North Africa. Okay. We have the chickpea tagine, we have the chakchuka, which belong to North Africa. We have the merguez, which are the beef and lamb sausage. They do have a little kick. And then we have the preserved lemon and olive chicken tagine. We have the cauliflower here. Again, they just fry, little seasoning, little ras el hanout on top, and then the lentil and butternut squash tagine.
great. Oh
That
man.
all looks
I'm just gonna.
absolutely
We're
delicious.
gonna start digging. I'm gonna get some
Go
taco
for it.
fixins, and we're gonna go.
Yeah,
for
we have some sauces
you.
like the red Irish. I'll bring it to you.
All right, thank
Like
you.
people don't know how lucky we are to have a chef as talented as Chef Zaid bringing all of his talent and focusing it on affordable food. It's amazing. Nana, now that we have, been well fed, so well
Yes,
fed by this
yes.
restaurant, now we have some fuel in us to do the important work that we're doing.
Right.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about what you and your organization have coming up in the next couple quarters that you think are important or essential that revolve around community justice or whatever else you're getting into?
Yes, thank you for that. Justice Warriors for Black Lives. It's our community collaborative. Our purpose is to equip and deploy Black folks and our allies in support of Black liberation, especially on what we describe as the legal front line. So we're going to be doing some what we call Webersations. They're on the web, they're conversations in which we talk about issues critical to our communities that also have some adjacency or intersection with the legal world. So we'll be talking about gentrification, this very topic, and how that intersects with the criminal sanction system and mass incarceration, death by gentrification, police killing us because they're in our neighborhoods because they've been called on us as you said, the sketchy blacks. So we're definitely going to focus on that. We're going to continue to push back against the Black identity extremist classification by the FBI, this false flag term. And we know that if we can push back with Black folks, that'll prevent them from creeping up to everyone else. Because trust, when it starts happening to Black people, they spread the hate for sure. So people should go to wearewarriors.com. That is our website. You can go to our Facebook page for Justice Warriors for Black Lives and pick up on that. We have some important trainings coming up. Know your rights training, folks. You're getting stuff on the internet, and I'm looking at it and I'm cringing because the things that are being taught are going to get you killed. They're going to get you tased. They're going to get you beat. So we definitely want to make sure that people pay attention and look out for our Know Your Rights when you're confronted by the police, our workshops. We also have cards we call Freedom Mantra cards. And if folks reach out to us, either through our website or through the Facebook page, we'll make sure to get some cards out to you that give you in 4 mantras what your rights are. We want you to have that. We want you to share that with the community. And then we're open. Folks can contact us if you want us to do trainings as well. With respect to my Cal State LA Pan-African Studies Department piece, people should look out for our Pan-African Studies Forum. We always have a forum every year. We've had the likes of Angela Davis, Erica Huggins. We've had, just Ava DuVernay. We've had a bunch of different people. And this time we have Yusuf Salam, who is one of the Central Park Five. Yes. And so he's going to be coming, talking to us about his experience and sharing with us, because not that many people get that.
For folks that don't know, Yusuf Salam was in a group of 5 young Black and brown youth of color that Donald Trump publicly called for their execution repeatedly by placing full-page ads in multiple papers in New York City. So if Donald Trump had his way, Yusuf Salam, the worms would have already eaten his body. Right,
and then they were able to show years later that in fact they were not involved, that their confessions were coerced because they were juveniles, they were young people, kids at the time. And so he would have killed not just children, but innocent children, right, because of his racism and his venom. And so Yusuf Salam, oh no,
Not here.
Not here,
Yeah.
right? So he will be at the Pan-African Studies Forum. We're pleased to announce that he'll be there. And so folks should just look out. You can catch up with me at Attorney Nana. You can go to the show's page. We have a show as well on Pacifica Conversations on the way, the Asafo edition. So you can go to that page, get information about what we're doing, when we're doing it. We air Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Of course, you can turn your dial or go to kpfk.org and you can hear us there.
If the time shifted anywhere on the web too.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right.
Now, I really want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This was lovely. Great company, great food,
Great
great
company, great
conversation.
meal.
Come on now, this is the life.
Welcome to LA. I tell my friends in New York, no, it sucks in LA. Don't come here. Don't come here. There's no good food. There's no good people. Stay in New York.
That's right. Keep it all for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank y'all all for joining us today. This is our very first episode of Restaurant Chats, keeping it political, keeping it real. You know how we do. This is a really great conversation with Susan Park, one of the owners of Revolutionario North African Tacos, and Chef Zayed, her husband. They have fed us incredibly well. You are stealing from yourself if you don't check this place out. You owe it to yourself. Come on down for a taco. That's it, y'all. Until we come back next month with a new Restaurant Chat, just stay tuned on the podcast. Check us out on the radio, on television. I have a new airplane show that I'm doing. It's a private airline, and you can't have access to it, but know it's out there. It'll make you feel good. That's it, y'all. Till next chat, I'm out.